This is The Guide Gals, a modern wedding-focused podcast by the experts at Here Comes the Guide. I'm Chelsea, a designer and inspired creative who's probably racked up over 12,000 hours on Pinterest, and the friend who's going to shoot it to you straight.
And I'm Caroline, a social media manager who's obsessed with dogs as ring bearers and will inevitably cry over your wedding video. We've seen it from all sides. We've been brides, planners, bridesmaids, and have worked at standout brands throughout the industry.
Think of us as an extension of your wedding party and hang out with us as we share the ins, outs, ups, and downs of the road to I do. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we're going to talk about what might be a sobering experience for you. We're going to talk about calculating the cost of your wedding bar. So, of course, you can calculate roughly I don't know, guess how many bottles of beer and wine that you might need based on your guest count. But then you have to think about glassware and bartenders and mixers. And there's a lot going on there. So we are going to dive into it today.
Yeah, because if you are going the BYO alcohol route, meaning that bar service isn't provided by your caterer or your venue, where do you start? What do you need to calculate? What do you need to consider? It can be very confusing. And even if your bar is included, what bar options are there? How much do those things generally cost? And what else do you need to know to make informed decisions when planning out the whole bar experience?
Yes, so we're going to dive into it today. We're going to talk all about it. We're going to figure out what you'll need to pay for and how to pick the perfect bar package for you. So yeah, we're going to break it all down. This is not an area that is super common knowledge to me had I not been, of course we did our research for this episode and we're involved in the wedding industry. But otherwise, I don't know, I've never bartended or anything, so I don't know anything about it. So yeah, this can definitely be a confusing place. So we're hoping to clear up any confusion that you might have, make it super simple for you.
Yeah, but if we're going to spend the entire episode talking about beverages for your big day, let's talk really quickly about our beverages of the day. So Chelsea, what do you have?
I have a really sweaty iced latte. It's only halfway gone, but it seems like it should be gone more. It's really on its last leg, but I think it still tastes good. So.
I hate when it is on the last leg because it's okay, this is a time frame. You need to have it quickly or it's done.
But I've neglected it. That's on me.
Yeah, and it's so sad when you do because then you come back to it and you're like, oh, okay. Well, I have Olipop. I haven't cracked it open yet, but I did have my coffee already today, and I already feel like it's stopping up my system. So I'm hoping that this is going to come to the rescue with its natural fiber, prebiotics, things like that. And I have the ginger ale flavor today, which I also am hoping is the ginger is going to help with that whole situation. Again, kind of a TMI. I feel like the last episode I was talking about peeing all the time, and now I'm talking about this. So really sorry, but that is what I'm drinking.
We're getting up close and personal right away today.
Okay,
so let's go ahead and dive into all of this. So first, I'm going to talk about how much does it cost to have a bar at your wedding. You can go ahead and expect to allocate between 8 to 20% of your total wedding budget to the alcohol and bar service. So this is going to be a significant chunk of your budget. Now, it's going to depend on how much you're willing to cover and how much your guest list likes to consume drinks. So here are a few different pricing structures that you might encounter. So the first one, price by consumption. So this is going to mean that you'll be charged for the amount of alcohol that your guests drink. This total is calculated by the bar and the staff at the end of the night. So a positive here is that you'll only pay for what you and your guests actually do consume. A con, though, is if your guests are super thirsty, you could end up spending much more than you had anticipated. So, positive and negative there. Another structure that you might encounter is going to be a price per person. So this might also be known as a bar package or a flat rate pricing. So the price per guest model is going to be a fixed rate for a set number of hours. So a big pro here is that there aren't going to be any surprises. You're going to know exactly what you're paying and exactly where that fits into your budget. A con, though, is if your guests don't drink as much as you had anticipated, so maybe they're not as thirsty, you might end up spending more than you should have if you would have done, the price by consumption kind of rule. So the per person cost for alcohol does vary greatly based on your location and your bar package, but generally you can expect to spend anywhere from $15 to $45 per person or more. So with all of that being said, just kind of think about your guest list, what maybe their habits are, how thirsty you think that they are. all of that, but there are going to be likely some options for you.
Yeah, and one thing I would say as a pro tip is that food and alcohol is like a huge part of your like budget. This is a huge portion of what you will be, paying. So definitely make sure as you're trying to pick like who you're going to have as a caterer and who you're going to have as bartenders, like try out your food. That's like a very common thing for you to do. Try out the like alcohol too. Try out the beverages because before you
Yeah.
decide what you're going to shell out for it, like make sure you know that it is totally, totally worth it. So I think it's a good thing to make sure it fits both the food aspect of it fits with your vision of the day and the bar because if you're spending that much money, make sure it works.
Yes, for sure.
Now we're going to kind of dive into different wedding bar options and what their general price is going to be with that. There's a lot of different ways that your bar can kind of shape out for the day. That can go from like premium open bars to limited and even cash bars. So there's a lot of different ways that you can make the wedding bar work for your budget, for your vision, and those things. So we're going to break down 5 different types of bar packages for you to consider. So I'm going to start with the open bar. And who doesn't love a wedding with an open bar, especially if you're a cocktail loving kind of person? Like this is a really great one. I personally love to see when it is a open bar. And this is probably one of the most popular options for weddings. The host of the wedding picks up the tab. The guests can drink as much as they want. And it can be either between like a premium level of alcohol or something that is a little bit more limited. But an open bar is that fixed rate per person pricing. The cost has already been figured out before the event and prepaid by the host. And there is usually an hourly rate associated with this for the bartender that you will also be paying. And just based off of the estimate of how much alcohol your guests will drink, that is usually factored in as well. And so these rates can vary based on quality of alcohol, number of guests, and even the venue. So there's a lot of fees that are calculated within that. But what we see kind of as the average cost of an open bar is anywhere between $15 to $45 per person. Again, or more, depending on those location, alcohol selection, all of those various things. But one of the pros of an open bar is that there are no surprises when it comes to cost. You get to go in knowing exactly how much you're paying. It's a flat rate. It's the best option most of the times. If you anticipate your guests being ones who love to drink, it might be nice to like immediately go in knowing what that's going to look like. But the con is that if your guests don't drink as much as you anticipated, you might be shelling out more than you needed to supply that open bar. So just take the pro and con with a grain of salt there, but like good things to think about.
And then a tip that I have about open bars is that you can offer an open bar that's still a little bit more budget friendly to you by opening or by having it open for a set number of hours. So I've seen this done lots of times, and I think that people really appreciate, like, if you aren't gonna have a full open bar, having that set period of time is like really great, and your guests will take advantage of it for sure. For example, you can end your open bar service like a few hours before reception ends. So you might have open bar from the beginning of the reception until like 9 o'clock p.m. And then maybe your reception ends at like 11 or something. Or you can do it even earlier than that. You can do whatever you want, really. You just want to make sure that you let your guests know. You want to be very clear about it in advance so that they're prepared to pay for their drinks at some point. Yeah, you want to make sure that you let them know. So that's something you'd want to put like maybe even on your wedding website or something like that. But of course, like you can have some signage like around the bars and stuff just to let them know what's going on. And yeah, they will likely take advantage if you have a little period of time where it is open for them. Yeah, and then yeah, that will end up being super or a lot more budget friendly for you in the long run. All right, so the next type of bar at your wedding that I'm going to talk about is going to be called a hosted bar. So, a hosted bar is very similar to an open bar in that guests can order as many drinks as they'd like on the host's tab, but the difference is going to be how it's priced, so how you're going to be paying for it. A hosted bar is going to be priced by consumption, so that means that you get charged for the amount of alcohol that your guests consume or the amount of bottles that end up being opened. This is tallied up by the bar staff at the end of the event. Okay, so the average cost of a hosted bar, this is going to depend on how much alcohol your guests drink, as well as the types of alcohol that you're providing. So a good
Mm-hmm.
estimate is that each adult guest will consume at least 6 drinks on average during a 5-hour reception. Go ahead and do the math there with that
Mm-hmm.
information. So a pro of a hosted bar is that you're essentially paying per drink, so there's no risk of paying for alcohol that your guests don't end up consuming. Then a con of a hosted bar is that if your guests are very thirsty, you could end up spending a lot more than you thought that you would. Not usually the surprise that you want to be stuck with at the end of your night. Yeah, so that is one of the options that you have as a hosted bar.
Next one we're going to talk about is the cash bar. This is a no host bar where guests are required to pay for their own drinks. This is typically the best option if you are feeling strapped for cash, if you're feeling like your budget is a little bit tighter, then your wedding guests now take on a little bit of the burden of the finances for this portion of things while still being able to get a drink at your wedding. The average cost of a cash bar is something that you really do still need to think about because while you are not paying for all of the alcohol, you are still paying for the setup, the tear down, the bartenders, and things like that. So the bartender, like all of this can range. So $50 to $200 or more per bartender, and oftentimes plus tax. So be sure to just talk to your venue or whoever you're using for the service to talk about any extra charges that you might be responsible for. Also, if you are doing a cash bar, you should do the tip or the gratuity. We have a whole episode talking about like tips and gratuities per vendors, and so you should definitely go listen to that episode. But for this category, and one thing we want to touch on here is that you should definitely cover the tip when it comes to the cash bar option. It can be seen as impolite to leave a tip jar out for for the bartenders. I would just be careful on that. I've seen it done well having a tip jar, and I've seen it done really poorly. So I think especially if you were doing a cash bar, you're already putting a financial expectation on your guests. So I would not leave a tip jar out there. You should cover that. So one of the pros of a cash bar is it's the most budget friendly option for sure, to provide for your wedding. But the con is it definitely doesn't provide the same guest experience as some of the other options. It's not as fun for guests, and you really, 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 really need to communicate the fact that you're having a
Mm-hmm.
cash bar. If you are not doing that, it's going to make the guest experience so much worse. So make sure you communicate those expectations so that it's fine. It really is fine to do a cash bar, but you just have to do it well through that communication. Don't put it out of the tip jar, and just make sure everything's surrounding, like hire really good bartenders who can make that a better experience, while then still saving you some money.
Yeah, I mean, communication really is super important there. Another, like a little tip, and we've seen like some people do stuff like this, is, if really it's not in your budget to do an open bar, you need to do a cash
Mm-hmm.
bar, that's fine as long as you communicate to your guests. But we've
Yeah.
seen people do stuff where they like offer drink tickets to their guests. So maybe like 1 or 2 tickets per guest. You could like leave these on their tables, like at their table place, or it could even be part of like a seating chart,
Mm-hmm.
where these, this first drink or first 2 drinks or whatever it might be are going to be prepaid by the host, so by you guys. And then from there, those drinks are free for your guests if they use their little coupon, their little ticket. But then after that, they can decide if they want to pay for more drinks, and yeah, that'll be up to them. But it is kind of a nice touch, which of course it would be an additional cost for you. It would cost more than not having those drink tickets,
Mm-hmm.
but it would be much lower cost than something like an open bar. So
Mm-hmm.
you have options. Okay, the next type of bar that I'm going to talk about, we're calling a limited bar. So, this option, we most likely see it as a venue that has beer or wine available to guests only. And then sometimes, if that venue is able to serve. So, of course, the big pro of having a limited bar is that you can save money. And then and another big pro is that you'll still have that open bar feel. So the
Mm-hmm.
con is that some guests might be like, I don't drink beer, or I don't like wine. They're gonna be okay.
Yeah.
They're gonna be just fine. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and keeping in mind that some venues are only able to serve beer or wine. So
Yeah.
once again, check with your venue. Make sure that you have those things squared away. And then just a real quick one to throw in there, the last type of bar that we're going to mention is a dry bar. So this would mean no alcohol. So of course this is going to it might disappoint your guests a little bit. That's going to be a con. A lot of people go to weddings and kind of expect it to be a party where they get to enjoy a drink or two or several or however many that may be. But a pro of course, of having a dry bar is that you're going to save a ton of money. It's way more affordable. Of course, you can even do something special like having a signature mocktail.
Yep.
You do you with that. And then, I mean, another big pro is that there's going to be no hangovers for sure. And you don't have to be nervous about, anyone drinking or driving. You might be able to, also cut out like some transportation options if that was something that you would have been planning on if you were providing alcohol at your event. So, yeah. Those are the 5 bar types. So, yeah, lots of differences there. Mainly the big difference is what it's going to cost you in the long run and guest experience too. The next thing that we're going to dive into, though, is going to be who is providing the alcohol for a wedding. And the answer might surprise you. It depends. So we're going to go through 3 popular options that we typically see.
Yeah. And just so I don't miss anything, I'm going to go over the first kind of section if like your venue is providing those things, and I will be looking down at my iPad to make sure I don't miss any of these points. And truly, one of the best parts of the fact that if your venue is the one supplying the alcohol, it is a huge weight off of your shoulders. You don't have to think about all of these things. Like, they're going to take care of the bar service and calculating the amount of alcohol that you need, how many glasses to rent, who's cleaning it all up at the end of the night. So it's like pros all around really for that one. The downside to this is that it is the costlier option. They are taking a big burden of what the planning is, and so that's going to reflect in how much it costs. But regardless of what type of venue you choose, they're going to have their own regulations around alcohol. Some things to consider when thinking about the policies around alcohol for your wedding venue. When it comes to in-house, the venue is going to provide alcoholic beverages for a fee and will not permit you to bring your own. So that's what that means by in-house policy, is that the venue provides all alcoholic beverages for that fee. BYO, or bring your own, is that you can bring your own alcohol. You can figure that out. There is also something called a corkage fee. So if you bring your own alcohol, the venue charges a fee per bottle to remove the cork and pour. I know some people might be thinking that's dumb. That is just how they figured things out. Like, there is something to the fact that like they're going to be taking care of all this for you. So unless you want to assign, which a lot of venues won't allow this, but unless you wanted to assign like somebody to this job, like they're doing a job for you.
Yeah, it's definitely someone who's doing a major service. So
oh yeah. If you see WCB only, that means, or just some combination of those 3 letters, that means only wine, champagne and beer are permitted. If you see food and beverage or bar minimum, that can get really confusing, but that's basically the minimum amount that you have to spend on food and or drinks to hold your event. And that's not including the tax or the tip. So if you are like, oh, like I'm just planning on providing this much alcohol, your venue might say, no, actually you have to provide this much. That's our minimum. And the last thing is a licensed server required. The server of alcohol must be licensed. So if you are bringing in your own bartenders or hiring outside of someone that the venue provides, they do have to have some sort of license for that. So these are all the things that you might run into when you are working with your venue to host your bar and set up all the alcohol.
And then a tip that I want to throw in there is to look into wedding insurance. So host liquor liability coverage is required by a lot of wedding venues, and it might protect you if you are held financially liable for property damage or alcohol-related incidents arising from your wedding. Okay, that sounds super complicated, but if that is something that your venue requires, they will let you know, and they will have that stuff laid out for you. But just know that it's something that might come up. The next person or people, whatever, who might be providing the alcohol for your wedding would be your caterer or a professional bar service. So if your venue doesn't provide an in-house caterer or bar service, you'll need to hire an outside caterer or and beverage company to, handle this side of things for you. That will likely come with licensed bartenders. So working with professionals will ensure that you have adequate alcohol and mixers, bartenders to serve and make those drinks, bar backs to whisk away dirty glasses, abandoned bottles, cleanup crew, Oh my gosh, don't sleep on the cleanup crew, seriously.
Oh
Like, think
yeah.
about how many drinks just get piled up on like
Oh
random
my
tables if no
gosh.
one was cleaning that stuff up. Like, oh my gosh. If the catering company that you hire isn't full service, you want to make sure that you're clear on what they do provide and what they don't. So,
Mm-hmm.
from bar mats to cocktail shakers to the alcohol itself, this will vary from company to company and from state to state. So, once again, we've said this 100 times across all of our episodes, but read those contracts, figure out
Yeah.
what's included.
Yeah.
Yeah, figure out what you need to provide.
Yeah, and as one more note on the terms of like the contracts and the services that they provide, make sure you figure out if the tip is included in that, because if it is not, you're going to need to pay the tip outside of that. And tipping your bartenders is typically 10 to 20% of the alcohol bill, and that will be split among them at the end of the reception, and you make sure you give that to them. So if it's not already in your contract, make sure you're thinking about that and budgeting that out as well when you're thinking about this option of who's providing the alcohol.
And once again, tipping can be confusing. Check out episode 45,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll have that linked in the show notes for you. We go over a lot of tipping details. So,
Yep.
and we
Yep.
have a worksheet for that. Yeah, so check out that episode. Lots of information for you there.
Now, another option for who is bringing the alcohol is you. If you are going to bring it, if you are going to do the BYO option, if the venue allows you to, you can do the BYO alcohol option. And also, you can search for this venue type on Here Comes the Guide if you are really partial to this. Like, if you specifically want to choose a venue that's going to allow you to bring your own, make sure that's something you're searching beforehand. And then you can buy all of these at bulk at normal, non marked up prices, along with any mixers, garnishes, glassware, ice, and all of that stuff. This option does give you a lot of control over what you're serving, how much you spend, but it can be a real big headache to figure out all of the things that you need. And you can't neglect any of those extra things, like the physical bar itself, the
Yeah.
strainers, shakers, straws, stir sticks, all of those things that you need to take into consideration before deciding if the DIY bar is the best option for you. Because remember, it takes time, energy, budget. Who is helping to navigate all of those things? Who's picking up the alcohol? Who's ordering these things? So the BYO option is great in a lot of ways, but also another thing you might encounter is that corkage fee, like we talked about earlier, and that can range anywhere between $1 to $10 per bottle. So check with your venue, figure out if that's going to apply, how much it's going to be, so that you can also budget that into this BYO option. And also, if you provide the alcohol, make sure you look into your state's liquor laws and make sure that everything is a-okay with this. Keep your purchase receipts so you can return any unopened bottles if your state allows that. That can be a great way to kind of save on some of this. And yeah, just make sure that, yes, this can be fun. Like, maybe you can bring your favorite cocktail that's made with Baja Blast and have tacos, as your late night snack. But yeah, it takes a lot to figure out who is navigating all of this, and it honestly might fall on you. And if you're budget strapped but still want to have a nice bar offering, you can do that. It's just, yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. And like we do always say like DIY with your or at your own risk, and this really falls into that. But I know Caroline at the end there talked about like some complicated things about state liquor laws and stuff. If your venue is not guiding you through this may be a venue red flag to look out for, because you've most likely never planned a wedding before. This stuff is super confusing, so they will likely be able to guide you through all of this stuff. And then another thing that I wanted to add too is that, say you're doing the BYO option, say that is something that your venue allows and they're happy to guide you through it. Does your venue then have a bartender that you're able to use, or do they have someone on deck that they can recommend for you? If not, I mean, you're going to have to find someone. You're not going to have your guests making their own drinks. So
Right.
you'll want to have a professional bartender there to serve your guests. And depending on your state or venue, they may need to be licensed and insured. So once again, your venue is most likely going to have someone that they can recommend that they've used before. If they do have a BYO option, I mean, they should be able to help you through all of that. Okay, now if you are doing BYO, how much alcohol should you buy for that BYO bar? So this answer is really going to vary greatly based on your overall budget, your guest count, and the duration of your wedding. So lots of things that are moving parts there to think about. But a general guideline is to allot at least 2 drinks in the first hour and 1 drink for every additional hour to each adult guest. So some people will drink more, of course, some people will drink less, some people won't drink at all. So, it'll probably average out when you do it that way, but this is a solid starting point for an estimate. So the average wedding keeps the bar open for up to 5 hours as well. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, and we have like all of the calculations and like a lot of the breakdown for it of like industry average or like how much we think you'll get per bottle. That is a lot for us to talk through in a verbal episode, or even just if you're seeing us on YouTube, like either of those avenues, it's hard to really fully gauge what this is. And I think it's nicer to have that information in front of you in a written out format. So check out in our show notes. This will be linked. You can see all of that information. We did a quick calculation. We have some lists of things for you there. And I think it'll be really helpful, especially if you are doing the BYO option. Like, this is a great bouncing off point to figure out like how to do all of those calculations. So check them out there. But we'll still have a few things that you'll want to consider in this episode.
Yeah. And then a tip too is to just, you can always, it's probably better to buy more than you need. So, imagine like being at a wedding and them being like, hey, we're out of alcohol. It's like that's such a buzzkill. So yeah, quite literally. So yeah, I'm going to run through a few questions that you can ask yourselves to determine your alcohol total. So, how many adult guests are you going to have? How many hours is your reception going to be? Will you have a cocktail hour? Will you serve drinks pre-ceremony? Will you have a champagne toast? Do you want to provide wine for the tables? Do you want to offer premium top shelf alcohol or more generic house options? Will you offer a full open bar with spirits or just beer and wine? Will you be offering one or more signature cocktails? What types of garnishes or mixers will you need? Yeah. Go ahead and run through those questions with your partner. And
Yeah. Also, another thing to consider if you are doing especially if you're doing a BYO option, if you have one bar, it's typically 2 bartenders per every 100 guests. But then if you have more than one bar, make sure you think about the location of those bars and how many bartenders you need for 2 bars. Yeah, there's those questions to think about too, not just like the alcohol you're providing, but who is also going to be maintaining that service throughout the night. And remember that all of these are just general guidelines. If you want to get more precise, go through your guest list, highlight the adults that you think will be more likely to drink. And if you can actually give a better estimate to how heavily, and adjust those amounts and percentages accordingly. Or maybe you know that everyone who's coming is maybe only going to have 1 to 2 drinks, and then the calculations look a little bit different. If you have the time and energy to go through your guest list like that, you might be able to fine tune it a little bit more. So there might be additional questions that you need to ask yourself if that's the route you're going to go.
All right, the last thing that we want to talk to you about, and one that may certainly pique your interest, is how can you save money with your wedding bar? So I'm just going to go ahead and run through these. Caroline and I have a few that we're going to rattle off for you. So the first one is you're going to opt for a limited bar with just beer or wine, and a signature cocktail might be optional there. So that's going to save you some money. The second one is you're going to host your bar for as long as you can, then switch to a cash bar. So we talked about this a little bit earlier. You'll just want to communicate this with your guests, have a time frame, have a clear cutoff, and give that information maybe on your wedding website, in some signage. Let them know when they need to start paying for their drinks. Be clear about it. Another way to save money, you can offer your guests drink tickets for a certain number of hosted drinks, then switch to a cash bar. So yeah, if you really know that it's out of your budget, like we said earlier, to have a totally open bar, these are like a really cute way, to be able to do a little something for your guests in terms of drinks. Another way is you don't have to feel like you have to pay extra for a champagne toast. So honestly, very few guests actually drink the champagne. And if you don't care about there being a champagne toast, people aren't going to expect it. And they're probably not going to notice if it's something that's skipped over. If you are doing speeches and you want to do toasts, all you have to say is, okay, everybody raise up your drink. And whether they're raising up a beer or a glass of wine, a cocktail, or like a Diet Coke, cheers, Another way is to host an off-season or a weekday wedding, so you'll most likely enjoy significant savings all around, but there can even be discounts when it comes to bar packages and stuff too. Another way is to host a shorter reception, so if you cut down on the number of hours that you have a bar available in any capacity, of course you're going to be cutting costs. So less time, less drinks are going to be happening. You can even arrange an after party at like a local bar or like somewhere else without feeling like you need to pick up the bar tab there. So, and
Yeah.
people will be less likely to expect it if you've now moved to a different location. Another way to save money, of course, is to cut down on your guest list. So it must be said, more guests equals more money. So this is the quickest way to cut down on that wedding budget from the start.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing you can do is you can see if your venue will exclude non-drinkers from the per person rate. If you have a good amount of underage, sober, or even pregnant guests, it doesn't hurt to ask. You might be able to save some money in that respect. Even if it's just a couple of guests that you're like, hey, there's gonna be 4 pregnant gals. Like, can I save a little money here? You should ask. Again, considering bring your own is probably one of the biggest ways you can save money. But again, it's complicated to calculate and manage this aspect of the wedding. So really, really decide on that if that's going to be the way you go, because buying alcohol in bulk does have the potential for big time savings. So host a wedding brunch. If you want to, instead of doing a evening affair, you could have an afternoon, early morning, whatever kind of thing. And people will be less inclined to overindulge in any of those alcoholic beverages, or you can have some more morning friendly beverages. You can do Bloody Marys, which are kind of weird in my opinion, or mimosas or whatever else. So having a brunch wedding is not weird. I love that idea and can save you some money in this respect. And finally, review your contracts carefully. Make sure that you ask about every service that's provided and be clear about any and all extras that you might need, because they do add up. And always read that fine print before you sign and think about all the things that aren't included in your contract. Things like tips, gratuity, or maybe those additional things that you want to add. So thinking about everything that is in fine print and what is not is a great way to save money, just because you're aware of all of the things and you can budget correctly. I'm so sorry, guys, if this episode was dizzying. This part of the planning process for your wedding can be dizzying. It can be really tough, but the main thing really is that there is satisfaction and safety for you and your guests. So thinking about all of these things, doing this research, listening to this episode, and investing in taking some time around this to think about all of this is going to keep that in mind, the safety and the fun that you're going to have on your day. Make sure you invest in this part too. Like I said, like we both said, budget aspect we know is a huge deal, but if you can really invest in this portion of it into licensed bartenders, liability insurance, providing even things outside of the bar like ample water or transportation, and making sure there are designated drivers, like there are so many aspects that go into this portion of your wedding planning. Unless you're going full dry bar, then like it's a little bit easier. And we're really glad that you're listening to this, especially if you made it to this point of the episode. You should feel like you are well able to plan out a good bar and do everything safely and hopefully save some money while doing it. But this was a lot. So make sure you do look at our show notes. Do look at all the other resources that we're going to provide for you, so you continue to feel like very solid in all the decisions you're making for this.
Yeah, there are a lot of pieces and parts to wedding planning that can feel like, I don't know, just like a very mysterious place and can feel very complicated. And I would say that budgeting for your bar is definitely one of them. So hopefully this is helpful to you. Like we said, check out our show notes. We're going to link a few things so you can make some calculations. But as always, if you have any questions for us on budgeting for your bar, budgeting for your wedding in any way, or wedding planning, please let us know. You can always reach out to us on our website, which is theguidegalspodcast.com. And on here, we have lots of resources for you as well. So we have a full freebie library where you can download lots of totally free stuff that'll help you in your planning journey. And we have our full episode library too. So I know we've referenced a few of our other episodes, I think, in this one. So check those out. There's lots of good planning stuff for you there. You can also find us on Instagram at The Guide Gals Podcast. We're on TikTok at The Guide Gals Pod. And we're on YouTube, the video version of all of our episodes on the Here Comes the Guide YouTube channel. So we'd love to hear from you and see you in those other places. We love connecting with you guys on your planning journeys. So yeah.
And I know we say it in every episode, like, we've wrapped up all this good information. It really was so much fun. And we always say until next time, cheers. But like, I think I mean it even more in this episode since we just talked about beverages for so long. Seriously, cheers to you guys.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.